excuse me, can we go outside, take this offline? You know, that's what I would hope if you're having a drink later on tonight, just with one person in the corner, you'll get on to sharing what you felt about that part. I mean, that's the more it really, you know, that goes very deep for most people, because most people can connect with that on some, you know, significant level, or they've been the person that have said I love you and they weren't honouring the person. You know, it may be the other way around. Is that ethics? Well, I guess it is. What I don't very often do, I mean, very occasionally do, is what I think of as ethics, which is, you know, let's talk about human cloning or genetically modified foods and see what the Bible has to say about it, or something like that. You know, I have got some, you know, published things. One or two of you were saying over supper, you used my improvisation book in class, and I have got a chapter in there about genetically modified foods that started as a sermon on that subject. So I do that. As I said, you know, about 1 in 5, I won't follow the grain of the scripture. I'll say, here, there's something we need to talk about. You know, so about a year ago, in the wake of Trump and Brexit, and all that's followed from both of those events, I felt I just needed to sort of say to the congregation of St. Martin's, what on earth is going on? I think we need to talk. What is really happening? And that's a more conventional sort of ethics or theology, but what you've got to be so careful about when you do that is it's not an op-ed. You know, that's why I put in the remarks in the commentary about this is not my chance to say, Hillary, you messed up for us, didn't you? You know, you had it in your hands, or you know, the guy that Comey or whatever. You know, I mean, that is not for me for a sermon. You can have it for an adult conversation outside another time. But everybody knows all that stuff. They're bringing all that stuff into the church. They want revelation from you. So you've got to be very careful about how you do that kind of thing. And of course, you can really antagonise the two people that, you know, I mean, certainly I did speak my mind about the Brexit vote after, you know, the following Sunday. I didn't do it as a sermon, I did it as opening remarks. This is how we're all feeling. Because it was absolutely devastating for St. Martin's. You know, we have 25 different nationalities on our staff. We have asylum seekers from all over the world. And, you know, migration was the biggest single issue. It was horrible. It still is. And I felt I had to say that, but you know, a few people came up to me afterwards and said, how dare you? Because they'd obviously voted Brexit, and I hadn't taken that sufficiently into, they were talking about mending fences and reconciling. I said, I'm sorry, you guys won. You don't get to talk about reconciling. You know, I was pretty cross. But I don't. No, I mean, I do tend to take the kind of the more. That's why I think I'm slightly pushing back about calling it ethics, because we now have a theology group at St. Martin's that meets once a month, and if there's an issue, you can imagine the usual raft of issues, but also some really out of the box ones. They're always dictated by the person who chairs it. I never know what they are before the session starts, and we do kind of ethics and how to do theological ethics in the room. I'm very wary of telling people how to live their lives. Yeah. Talk about the head, the heart, the hand and the gut in preaching sermons. And a sermon, I think the one that I used just now is fairly representative. It's really about the head. Oh, isn't it interesting? This is a chiasmus, and actually, isn't it interesting? It follows all the kind of different bits of Israel's story and builds up to a climb, and then it sort of unravels them afterwards. And isn't it interesting? It all goes into Jesus' baptism, and the words that come from the cloud in Jesus' baptism are almost identical to these words in Isaiah 43. And there's 3 of them, and there's 3 clauses in the baptism declaration. There's 3 words, precious on us. You know, that's all head stuff. That's really, I find that really, really fascinating. But obviously, it's the gut stuff. It's a gut sermon. It's about, you know, when I was in tears and the my friend just hugged me, and that's the stuff that really speaks to me. So it's the interplay between the head and the gut for me. Sometimes I do no hand at all. There's no takeaway. There's no therefore. I mean, there wasn't really much of a takeaway today. I don't think that's a problem. Sometimes there is clearly a takeaway. We've got to, all of us have got to think seriously about, but that's why I said, the takeaway, surely it's got to be better than I need to try harder to love my daughter. I mean, that bland sort of takeaway. And I think that's what people who use the word sermon or preach in a pejorative way, in a negative way, assume that it's all some opinionated, self-important religious figure imposing their prejudices and agenda on an unwary congregation. Where could they possibly have got that idea from? I really hope I'm not trying to do that, but it's interesting that you call it ethics. I mean, I love coming to talk to these kind of events because I love talking about preaching, and I love helping be part of the way we form one another as preachers. I still do things as an ethics professor, and I do things as a runner, a person who runs a major non-profit in the UK, but I most enjoy talking about preaching because ethics is obviously really important, but I guess preaching is closer to the heart of it all. Go on.
I've got two I can ask quickly, and you can just answer whichever one you think is better. But one is while you're waiting on revelation to get necessary inspiration on what you're going to say, are there any specific ways of prayer? And two is how do you schedule your life as a parish priest to really take the time out of this calls for?
Great questions. Let me start with the second one. I don't take appointments on Fridays, and Fridays is my thinking day. That can be writing, that can be reading. I mean, when I say I don't take appointments on Fridays, actually last Friday we have an annual pilgrimage to Canterbury for raises money for our homeless centre, so I had to be at the launch of that. I couldn't avoid that. So, but I would say about 3/4 of the time I can do that. I can take phone calls because they don't really interrupt anything, but I don't. I try and physically remove myself from my office and go somewhere else. But forgive me if I'm telling you things that are kind of blindingly obvious, but I notice when I'm preaching. I'm preaching. That is okay. So I'm preaching on the Sunday I get back from this event. Fly in on Saturday morning. So I wrote that sermon 2 weeks ago because I knew I wasn't going to be in no shape on the Saturday morning. I haven't seen my family. They don't deserve me to come back saying, "Oh, I've got a sermon for tomorrow." That's not professional, and that's not whatever the family word for professional is. Familial. I mean, it's not being a grown-up. If it's really important, you plan it some time in advance. And also, I mean, one other thing about that is to say, I really, really get frustrated with Saturday night preachers because what's the music director supposed to do about that? What's the person leading the intercession supposed to do about that? What about, okay, let's say we usually say the creed and then maybe the choir have an anthem on. What about changing that round this Sunday because there's this wonderful new Roman Catholic revival song called Precious, Honoured and Loved, and why can't we sing that because it goes really well? Well, you can do none of that if you're a Saturday night preacher. You're just not being a team player. So it is about growing up, in my view. Perhaps the more important question, what habits of prayer? Well, for me, I mean, it's basically Lectio Divina is what I'm talking about, because I'm kind of casting my hand over the text until it lands on a place, and then I don't kneel down. I sit in my chair. I usually look at the ceiling, or certainly close my eyes, and I say, "Precious, honoured, and loved." Never really spotted that before. Those 3 words, I wonder how they're different from each other. wonder which of those words feels like a good word to me and which I don't really like very much. Honoured. Why do I not really like honoured? What could be wrong about honoured? When has somebody ever honoured me in a way that made me feel was wooden or was a kind of southern civility form of rejection? You know, what's going on there? Has that ever happened to me? Where in literature can I remember reading a novel where that happened? Does that happen in the Henry James novel? Probably does quite a lot. A lot of honor. Jane Austen, somewhere in that territory. Is that something I could use in a sermon? Does that sound a bit pretentious? Could I summarise it? Could I find it? You know, I'm asking that kind of, it's not quite sharp enough to be really getting into the gut. So was there a film, a movie I've seen? Why is it bothering me? And I'll just keep going around. Did something happen to a friend of mine? Has anyone ever told me a story about that? Still not really connecting. Okay, well, let's stay with it a bit longer. You know, and that process can take a while. And that's when I really won't take the phone call, because that is the most significant moment. And it is, and yes, you could take that into the silence before morning prayer or however else you do things, find your own pattern. But to me, that's the crucial thing. And if I start writing a sermon before I've been through that process, it's no good. And the trouble is then you get cross because you think, I'm not going to throw away the 4 paragraphs, they're wonderful paragraphs. They're just not going anywhere. But they're good, I mean, they should be collector's items and we should put them in. And then you get yourself into this terrible tangle. Say, I could fit them in somewhere, or I could put something in around. No. Chuck it all away. You should never have started. You haven't been through that process. Start again. Go back to the beginning. Or it's a bit like building a wall. You went wrong with that bit of brick in the middle. I'm sorry, sunshine. The wall's got to go. And you've got to start with go back to where you put the brick down too quickly. You know? So, yeah, but it is. I mean, Lectio Divina, I think, is a great, because Lectio Divina, in my humble view, is how the New Testament came to be written. If you think about the Gospels, they were written by communities of people that said, and the man was lowered down from the roof on a kind of a stretcher. I wonder how many people were carrying that. It was probably 4 people carrying that stretcher. You know, that's how the Gospels came to be written, as far as I can say. That's why they're kind of the same, but kind of different. So we've got over time. Okay, we'll take 2 more and do this really fast. Okay, you have to speak fast, and I have to speak really, really fast.
Okay, so I'll just couch this by saying that earlier today we had this fantastic panel, which was the worst sermon I ever preached, and what I learned from it. So my question for you isn't so much what's your worst homily, but my question is instead, in what ways, what's the most significant way in which you've changed from the beginning of your preaching career till now, and what was that insight? How did that insight come to be in terms of like a significant change?
Good.
Mine was just I had a quick question, which was in the revision process, you asked about pacing, whether folks needed to have something in their hands, and I wondered what you meant, like that was one of the considerations, and I wondered what you meant by that.
Okay, quickly on that one, I mean, like today, I was kicking myself because I was sitting there as people were coming in thinking, I should have sent Isaiah 43 to the organisers of the conference beforehand and asked them to put it in your hands, because it's twice as meaningful a sermon if you're quite familiar with that, or you've got it in your hands. And you know, if you're in a church which doesn't usually have a Bible in the pew, or doesn't usually hand out an order of service with the readings on it, then maybe this Sunday you're going to, again, that's about not being a Saturday night preacher. You know, I mean, if you've written it on Wednesday, written it on Monday, whatever. So, and then to how I've changed. I think, to be honest, I came from a place of scarcity. That's to say, I've got about 8 really good knockdown stories, fantastic stories. You know, I realise I've got about 40 years of ministry, 8 into 40. I mean, if I move parish every 3 or 4 years, then probably, and then hope that people maybe use them twice when I'm in each parish, I can just about stretch them out for the whole of my ministry. That's what I call a scarcity mindset. Or as a curate, you know, as a first appointment, I get to preach once a month. I've had all these thoughts in the last month. I have to get every single one into this sermon, you know. So I don't worry about stories now. I very seldom use the funny line about Abraham and Isaac, kind of, you know. That's all about the trusting. That's all about the truthfulness of the prayer that searches deep inside for something authentic that you haven't heard from a funny story from somebody else before, but is absolutely true to human existence. And not necessarily from your life, it might be from your life, but you actually attribute it to someone else. But that anxiety that I'm not going to have anything interesting to say is all about your desire to impress people, look good, and it also leads you to tell the story that's vaguely relevant to a guy called Isaiah I once knew, which has got nothing to do with the argument of your sermon, which is what, you know, beginner preachers do all the time. You hope that people would kind of get past that. Some do, some tragically don't. But those would be the two. They both come from the same place of anxiety that I've either got to do it all today, or to be honest, the more regularly I preach, the better I am at it. It's a you think it wouldn't be like that, but it is. It's a rhythm thing, and you can actually just have to relax and say, I have to trust the Holy Spirit will give it to me. But also, I have to go and do some hard work in the commentaries. I can't just close my eyes and it just sort of drops from above. That's why I said about 5 to 10 commentaries, because you've got to do some spade work. You've got to, the stuff I said about the chiasmus and stuff. I didn't just look at Isaiah